Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Averill Park Central School District Board of Education meeting on this Monday, April 12th, 2021. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll be moving now into our item number 2, which is the policy review, and we will be doing policy review until about 6:30. So if those of you are out there and you're not really interested in hearing the policy review, you can feel free to come back at 6:30 for the rest of the meeting. Okay, and with that, I'm going to have Kim Nugent take over because she's kind of been leading our policy review.
Okay, so tonight we're going to start with 4710, which is on page 94. And Heath is here to be a resource if you have any questions regarding the 4700s, which tend to be related more to the high school level. So I guess whenever you guys are ready.
Okay. I do have some notes from Anne also, so I might be cross-checking things, so bear with me. Starts on page 94.
Yes, 4710 is grading systems.
Okay. All right. So in the middle of the first page of 4710, where it says grading shall be based upon student improvement, achievement, and participate in classroom discussions. And then we have that report cards are sent at least 4 times a year, but that we're on trimesters now, aren't we? So should we have up that to 3?
It's split. K5 is trimester, but 612 is still quarterly. So we probably need to just spell that out.
Okay. Or not, or maybe say at least 3 times a year.
I would maybe go with periodically. Just because you never know when that's going to change again, or.
Right. Would we ever do it less than 3 times a year?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I could see potentially 612 going to 3 times a year or something, or.
Okay. But so,
yeah, I think
so
your idea
just
is a good one though, Jess, right? Say at least 3 times a year, because I think the periodically is pretty wishy-washy.
Right. It gives a little bit more structure, but not committed.
The only part that caught my eye in that paragraph in terms of like actual practice at the high school is that it says the parents and guardians should be provided a written report card at least 4 times a year.
Oh,
we really kind of have shifted towards doing electronic notification. And we do have an opt-in system in our opening newsletter, but I think about 25 people a year actually sign up to get written materials.
okay. So we can just take out the word written and then change it to at least 3 times a year. Yes, everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. And then Anne had a comment on page 95. We need to insert the proper titles. Kind of in the middle of it, there's a bold that says insert titles.
Right now in practice, just in terms of what we're already doing, it might make sense to leave that as the building principal or designee. In practice, the designee that typically does this as the first line of defense at the high school is our guidance secretary. So she maintains those records, fills out the forms, keeps them on file. And then when there are irregularities or issues that come up, she brings them to me. And then Sharon Perez and I look at them on a quarterly basis.
Okay. So we'll change it to building principal or designee. Or up, make that update.
I think it's just as more of a question for the group. I understand, Heath here representing from a high school standpoint, but does Rob and his team, like there's not, my assumption is he's not going to have a problem with building principal or designee either. Jim, based on your past experience, because I understand the elementary level, probably, it's not as much about the grades, but at the middle school level, I know they certainly focus on that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think building principal or designee would work across the board.
Okay. And then at the bottom of that page, we have two other places. So the other piece on this paragraph, they said, do we want to make sure we leave that in there so that it approval needs to be had if a grade is changed by an administrator. So I'm saying, yes, I think we should leave that in there, just kind of as a side note too. And then at the bottom, we have a time frame. And then again, is it the building principal or the assistant superintendent for instruction, where it says there will be a limited number of personnel other than teachers have access or permission to enter or change grades in the systems.
Well, just speaking from practice as the high school, and I'm glad that Chris brought up the other levels because that's kind of important as well. So thanks, Chris. I will say again, in terms of the time frame, right now, currently Sharon and I do that on a quarterly basis. So we look at grade changes 4 times a year. And the only people in my building who have access at the building level to grade changes are the guidance secretary, my secretary, and me. Again, I guess I can't speak to the other levels. So for me, it's almost like saying building principal and designee might be helpful. Again, I can only speak to my level.
I think that allows flexibility, though, to your point, Heath, just.
Building principal or designee.
And then in terms of the time frame, is that the other one we got to figure out?
Should we say, should we leave it at annual? And if you go, yeah, I know you do it quarterly, but.
Yeah, I think to me, this is more about auditing your system to make sure that, if you have a paper form that the right person went in on the right student and made that change. I think annual is a prudent time to be doing that. If you can do it quarterly, great, but I think annual is a must.
Okay. I'm good with leaving it as annual. And then on page 96, we again we need to insert a title and a time frame. It says the insert title will develop regulations and procedures for adding users, establishing user access rights, deactivating or modifying user accounts, granting permissions to access the system. And then that permissions will be reviewed. And I think we should have that annually unless there's reason to do it less frequency.
Right. So yeah, we actually did this fairly recently. So if you want to put me as the title, because I typically will work with the folks in the data office on that.
Okay.
It makes sense to have me as the title, as that falls under my umbrella. And then I don't think we would ever do it more frequently than annually. And honestly, we did a lot of work the last time, so we're probably in pretty good shape, but having that discussion annually is not going to hurt us to just make sure it still works.
Okay. So we'll put in the assistant superintendent and then annually. Got those okay, Kim? Does anybody have anything else on 4710? Okay. Are we just keep marching down with 47? Oh.
Yeah, so we'll just move through the 4700s. So the next one was 4741.
Okay, so I have a question because we have on here, which was in italics that NISBA included some as sample, which was student progress reports to parents as 4712, and then 4714 parent conferences. And I have kind of notes, I think I looked at those, but this progress reports, you know, we have school tools, so I don't feel like that we need to have a policy in regards to that, based on their sample policy they sent. And I also don't, the parent conferences I thought was pretty benign, their sample too, which was 4714, I think it was. Or are those the ones not reviewed by NISBA? Am I mixing that up?
The italics are our current policies, which I.
Right, so I guess we need to talk about whether we want to take those out.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I put that backwards, the bold versus the italic. I don't think we need the progress report to parents. And then the parent conferences was 2 simple sentences or paragraphs, which actually were a sentence apiece. So, or maybe not, maybe a little more. But I don't think we need either one of those. So I don't know if anybody else has a strong opinion about those. I feel like we can omit them.
Yeah, they're pretty dated and they refer to NCLB, which no longer exists, or at least 4712 does. And 4714 is also from 2002, so they're almost 20 years old at this point.
Right.
And they're not required, so.
Right. So we're okay with omitting them. Then we have also on the list 4720 and 4720, 30, and 40 before we get to 41. They're on the list. I don't remember seeing. Oh, those were local ones too. Well, 4730 was local on homework.
Those are ones we had asked for from NISBA. Because it says on the table of contents, it says regular text sample policy is available or could be developed. We had asked for any sample policies they had, and they gave us the few that they had, which weren't many. Which in my binder, Linda had made a little tab. It's 4316, 4600, 4730. We do have a sample for. You know,
but we don't
work one.
We currently don't have a local policy for those 3.
Well, we
Right?
have a progress report policy, yes. It's just a different number.
Oh,
But 4712, we don't have a homework or an honor roll policy currently.
okay, so that's easy. Then we don't even have to think about those if we don't have them.
Right.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I just wanted to address those few that were sort of in the middle on the table of contents. Okay, so 4741. Right, that's the next one you said then?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it needs a little bit of updating because I don't think we have a valedictorian or salutatorian address anymore.
That's correct. That's correct.
So I think it'd be, if you want to add language to it, we should add language about how there'll be, and maybe we just say at the principal's or discretion to, you know, student speakers will be selected, or kind of leave it open depending on the year and how it goes and how you want that to happen. I'm not, you know, I hate to tie you guys down. if it changes, slightly from year to year.
The general gist, through Colleen Gomes and when I was here, and it really lasted straight through Michelle and even in the last 3 years, has typically been that any student in the senior class can submit a speech for consideration. And then there is a committee that looks at those speeches without any identifiable information. And they pick the 2 speeches that they feel best represent the messages that the class should, would hopefully be embodying. And then we find out who those people are and we let them know that they're the speakers. So instead of a valedictorian or a salutatorian, there's a welcoming and a farewell.
So Kim, do you want to take a crack at drafting that language that says, 2 student speakers will be selected, one for a welcoming, one for a farewell address, and we don't have to describe the process in any way in the policy, I don't think, but just.
Yeah, I can work, Heath, if you don't mind, maybe you and I can just come up with a few sentences about it.
I am happy to help out, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, and then you want to keep the rest, Jesse, though, the first 2 paragraphs and then graduation recognition?
Yes, I think so.
The one thing to just that I underlined as I kind of peeked through was that last year we made an amendment to the calculation of class rank. So we do have a number of current classes where we do class rank based on 5 semesters. So that's for 21, 22, and 23 for students graduating in those years. And that was due to the pandemic and the 1 semester of pass fail that's going to be built into their transcripts.
But it already says we'll exclude pass fail. So I don't think we really need to or update the language, right? Because it always says class rank for transfer students. Okay, so it says transfer students. We'll exclude phys ed, pass fail subjects, and any non-numerical grades.
Right, that was definitely our practice for kids coming in from
right. So yeah. Maybe in the top paragraph where it says students first 6 semesters of high school, excluding physical education, and then in there we can write or pass fail classes, something to that effect. So that sort of covers it without us having to rewrite it for the pandemic or change it after after those classes have passed through and we're back to the 6 semesters. What do you guys think, Chris, Peter?
I think the more flexibility we can put in here, the better. Sorry, I'm getting my chorus here. That's why I was muted. But I think the more flexibility, the better.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with Chris.
And this is pretty much
Okay.
at the high school level, right? I mean, this
Understand.
is strictly for seniors. Yeah.
Yes, for class ranking. So Doug, you think you're okay with that too, except if
Yes,
we say
I-
excluding phys ed and pass fail?
Yes.
Does that cover your concern, Heath, if we changed it that way?
Yeah, no, actually it does. That would cover all of our current practices. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, we don't want to reinvent what you guys are doing. We want to make sure our policies reflect it accurately, I think, mostly. I mean, maybe sometimes we have to reinvent what you guys are doing. I'm just kidding. All right. I think that's it. That one's pretty short. Then we'll have to relook at the language for the graduation speakers when you guys come up with that, but that's pretty good. Okay, so next one, 4750. I have a couple, I have one question. What is a child study team? Do we have those still? It first shows up in item number 2.
Yeah, we do. They may not always be called that, but the premise is the same across all buildings.
Okay. Is that commonly accepted language or name of a team so that it can be inclusive?
I think so. Heath, yours is not a child study team, but if I said that to the high school, you would know what that essentially means. Yeah, I think it's kind of universally understood.
Okay. Okay. So something we don't necessarily need to modify then. Okay. All right. And then in the last paragraph, we said the policy will be posted on the district website and included in the staff parent handbooks. Is that happening right now, or should we have that and change to an or?
I'll defer to Heath on that. I'm not as familiar with the handbooks that go home.
I will say that most of 4750 in practice is not applicable to the high school. It's more applicable to the practices of the middle school and the elementary school, because grade retention and grade status for us is based on number of credits. So the process just kind of looks different than it does as described here. So I would say a lot of this policy is more like middle school, elementary school centric.
It might, and I'm certain we probably don't have a quote unquote student handbook at the elementary level like we would at the high school. It may be good just to have it, that it's posted to the district website and strip the language out.
Okay, I'm good with that too. Just as long as we have somewhere public that we can point people to if they have questions on it. Okay. Got that, Kim? Does anybody have anything else for 4750? Okay. Oh, there's also a regulation that goes with this one.
We might, I think Keith makes a really good point about 4750 in the middle school elementary component. We may want to present this to the principals, and as long as you're okay with, there might be some small tweaks in language. If it's anything of substance, we'll bring it back to the board. But I'm just, now that I'm looking at it again from that mindset, we were so much more focused on the high school part of this. It might be worth having them look this over.
Okay.
Especially Dennis, who's been around for a while and knows kind of the history a little bit, and Rob now too, just to make sure. There's nothing that jumps out at me, but I'd hate to approve it, now and then find out a week after we approve it that that's not what they do. Or
okay, that sounds good. Because obviously we'll see these all again with any markups once to go to approve them. But yeah, if you can show them with taking that edit that Matt recommended, including that. So just, will be posted on the district website, period.
yeah. Yeah, and they might actually be done. I don't know. So yeah, we'll take it out and kind of just show it to them, make sure we do it. Kim, we can even add that we have an admin meeting coming up on Wednesday. I can throw it on that agenda.
So if you guys continue to include the regulation, can you act, well, that's up to you what you do with them. But I just have a couple things on the regulation clerically. Sometimes you say students and sometimes you say youngsters. That was a new word in these policies, was youngster. So I think we should just say student. And then just for consistency, like the head of each section, the first procedure for retention is italicized, and then you have procedures for acceleration, that should be italicized, and then the procedure for grade guidelines for 6 through 8 should probably be italicized too, just to keep it consistent in the formatting. If you guys even keep the regulation. Because we don't have to look at this. Oh. It's not ours to approve any longer. Does anybody have anything else on that regulation? Any comments, suggestions?
No, because it sounds like it's coming back to us, right, Jess? We'll let Jim work with the building administrators, and then we get it
Right.
back. Is that word? Okay.
Right. And then the regulation that goes with it too.
Right.
Okay.
The graduation requirements seem so anticlimactic. It's not noted whether it's local. Are you referring to
there's-
4770, Jess?
No, 4760. If you look at the table of contents, Chris,
okay. Yeah.
Avon Park currently has a policy 4760, which NISBA did not review. So that's why I'm asking about it. So that's why it's not in your big packet either, because they didn't review it.
Yeah, I'm not even seeing it in the table of contents. It looks like they go from 4750 to 4770.
Oh. Maybe this one.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the essential policy manual table of contents.
Mhm.
Yeah. For some reason,
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe I'm looking at a different version.
Maybe. I know Linda sent a couple because we did have some questions on why weren't some of them reviewed, I think. And maybe she did send an updated version. Okay, so I think we're good without it then. All right, so yeah, so now Chris wants to talk about 4770 because he said it already was. Do you have any questions or comments on it? Does anybody
It
have
seems
anything?
to be short and sweet. You know, and it ties into the graduation ceremonies one. But I see a reference to the graduation one, but I don't see to the early graduation. So I don't know if that is needed or not. But
Okay. We have at the end of the main paragraph, it says such regulation shall be approved by the board and shall be provided to the students and parents each year once a student reaches the 8th grade. Do we do that? Provide them with the regulation?
We provide them with an overview of graduation requirements in their orientation for students and parents. Yes,
Every year.
every year. It's a part of our program.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it's reflective of what our current mode of operation. So that is accurate. Okay.
it is saying once a student reaches the 8th grade, but it sounds like Heath, you're referring to when kind of like their orientation. So maybe we should say as they enter 9th grade.
Well, we go down in January of 8th grade and get them ready for course selection. And at that time, we review graduation requirements with the students. And then in January, we do a parent night for incoming 8th or 9th graders too.
Okay.
So we're covered. Perfect. Good question though, Chris. All right. So no changes. Anybody else? Doug, Peter, any thoughts on 4770? 4771.
Over the years about fairness of the ranking, depending on
Muddy the waters with anything, unnecessary to the function of, what you guys want to do today. At our last Suburban Council principals meeting, right before break, We actually discussed rank at length because of the pandemic and the context of what it says a survey. We discovered that Averill Park is one of the last schools in suburban council that puts rank on transcripts explicitly. So, locally, we're kind of looking at whether we should move away from putting rank on transcripts because we're a standalone. Then the conversation kind of diverged into schools who don't do ranking at all. And surprisingly, Bethlehem and Niski had already taken that move. So Bethlehem and Niski had already removed ranking altogether, from their processes. Several schools were talking about it. So I did introduce the topic to our guidance staff and our counselors just as a little bit of a primer, like what would happen to our kids' admissions to college if we were to do this, how would it change the game? So we are starting to talk about it. There's no question it's a hot topic right now, especially with the pandemic, right? And just how, what are our grades reflecting, given our circumstances?
Yeah, it's been a discussion long before that too, but you leave it to me to muddy the waters.
No, I'm with you though, Peter, because I know at least from firsthand experience, depending on what the student takes in terms of classes and the grade that he or she receives from that particular course, if you've got a student that challenges themselves and takes some additional things versus kind of sticking with what's needed for graduation, you end up having, situations there where the student's rank may be lower, but the individual has taken more of a course load that would prepare them to go off to college.
And I'm not so sure that colleges look at ranking anymore anyway.
That was the feedback that my counselors gave with regards to, their work with college admissions officers. So I would suspect over the next couple of years, we may start to work with some stakeholder groups at the high school and kind of flesh out, some more dispositions on this topic and, maybe take a look at it a little more deeply and see if there's something better that we could be doing.
I think discussing with graduates also might be interesting to see their experience in college.
Okay. All right. Anything else on policy? Good sidetrack, Peter, but I think it was relevant. So thanks for that. And clearly Heath had updated hot off the press information about it. So that's good. So anything else on 4771? Okay, 4772. On the bottom of page 105, there's some optional language, and I am okay with including the optional language. It talks about students earning the CDOS or SACC, that they're able to participate in the graduation ceremony for both graduation ceremonies, I guess. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that. Okay, so I guess sounds like we'll just leave it in. And then on page 107, the last paragraph before the cross references, it says the district shall provide annual written notice to all students and their parents of the requirements of this policy and associated regulations. And I just want to make sure that's our standard practice.
Is this another one, Matt, that could be posted online?
Yeah, it could be as part of the policy. I'm just wondering, Heath, do you put anything regarding graduation language in student handbook that would be part of your annual notification?
Right. I was kind of just reviewing. We don't have this explicitly in our handbook.
Okay.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean we couldn't add it there, or, you know, add it into our opening newsletter each year, you know, as we open the school year. Whatever direction, you know, systematically we want to take, I can certainly support.
I mean, obviously it would be part of the policy manual. It's not like we have a specific section on the website about graduation. So we would have to create something, or we could put it into the handbook and then we've notified it that way. It might be the more restrictive, least restrictive path is to just include it in the handbook. So we've done our due diligence.
Okay.
Heath,
but
what about the course
either-
catalog?
The course catalog has a lot of information about graduation. It does not go into detail on CDOS and SACC credentials and the ability to continue and participate in 2 graduations. It's not there.
But would that be from
It
your
would
point of
be-
view, would that be a logical spot to put it versus the code of conduct or student handbook type document or website, or no? I don't know. I'm asking.
No, I think that's fair. And, you know, as I look at the language here, I think it would fit in just fine in the course catalog, in the current section on graduation practices. Yeah.
Okay. So leaving the language in the policy would cover whatever route you take. Because it says
absolutely.
annual written notice, or do we just want to say annual notice to all students of the requirements?
So remove written. Is that what you're saying, Jess?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sort of asking. Yeah, would be my suggestion maybe.
Yeah, I think that leaves it open enough to choose the best path.
Right. And however you guys decide to execute, because we have the regulation, which we're not required to approve anymore. Did anybody have anything else on the 4772?
I did on page 105. So the introductory paragraph there that starts with the graduation and commencement ceremony. The last sentence.
Yeah.
Speakers may be selected from among the graduating class in accordance with district policy 4741. That seems to tie back with the class ranking, and I think it's tied to salutatorian, valedictorian. If we're removing that language from there, should we just strike that sentence altogether? So just that last sentence of the paragraph, starting with speakers may be selected through the 4741 reference.
Well, Chris, Heath and I are going to revise the speaker procedure. So it will still be addressed in 4741. It won't necessarily be a salutatorian or valedictorian. It'll be the process that Heath described, you know, where students submit speeches and they're chosen, you know, kind of blindly to.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as long as there's something there that it references back to.
Yeah, it should. Once we finish, I think it will reference back to the process.
Okay, that works for me. Thank you.
Yep.
Good. All right. Thanks, Chris. Anything else on 4742 or 4772? And when you guys go to work on the regulation, again, there's just a couple spots where we have to insert appropriate title. And then at the very end, it says the district shall provide annual written notice to all students and their parents of the requirements of this regulation associated policy, which I think you maybe can take out because we have that in the policy because we just discussed, that. So I don't know if you need it in the regulation, but that's your call. Just pointing it out. Anything else on that before we move to 4773? Okay, so 4773, this is, I think, a new one for our consideration. And when I read through it, I was okay with including that. But, you know, does anybody else have an opinion on that?
I'm with you, Jess. You can tell they've spent some time on this one.
Yeah. Heath, were you in agreement with this one too? You said when you reviewed them.
Yeah, I absolutely was. This is very accurate. It supports
Okay.
what we do. It doesn't impede anything we would want to do. It's accurate.
Okay. So that was the only thoughts I had on was whether we actually included or not. And I think seems like a good idea. I see you nodding, Doug. Thank you. Okay. Kim, was there anything else that we needed Heath for? I want to make sure we cover everything from that perspective.
No, you guys hit on most of the things that I had noted or had questions about myself or just wanted to provide clarification on. So it's pretty tight from my end.
Thank you.
So we have a few minutes. I don't know if you want to go back to, is it 4452? I believe is where we left off. No, I'm sorry, 4325.
Okay, hold on.
Where we left off. Which is page 57.
Okay. All right. That seems like a pretty heavy, potentially heavy one, right? Because this is all the RTI.
Yes, this is essentially, it's a policy that really gets supported by our plan that you saw. Gosh, I think it was latter part of last year or over the summer.
Yeah, with Kara.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so the policy in and of itself probably won't, I mean, it's going to allude to things, but the plan is really all the detail in it.
Right. So I didn't know if you wanted to get into that one so much, Kim, or if we wanted to just take a 5-minute break or.
Yeah, the other piece is it is indicated that it's a local and a notice. So it's not a required policy. So I don't know, and it's up to you all if it's something you feel has to be in because we have the comprehensive plan. You know, do we need a policy, I guess?
Right. I have that actually noted at the top of my thing too. Is like, does it account appropriately for, because we have the nice RTI plan?
Yeah, the section up on top in gray says, you know, it alludes to using RTI instead of AIS. If the board rescinds its AIS policy to ensure that it has an adequate RTI policy in place. So it sounds like you kind of want one or the other. However, districts must still ensure that there is a district developed procedure for determining, which is essentially our RTI plan. So I think you want a policy. AIS and RTI get kind of used interchangeably a lot. We need to make sure we're providing AIS K-12. RTI is typically a K-8 thing. Once you get to the high school level, it's less about research-based programs, universal screeners. We're doing less of that. So RTI is probably not an appropriate term for the high school. So AIS would likely cover us K-12. So I think knowing that we need one or the other, I think AIS makes sense with reference to an RTI plan.
Okay. All right, so. Okay, so I guess my comment, so if we leave this one in and we call it AIS, that covers the RTI.
Right.
And the rest of the alphabet. But let's see. It says, yeah, so we have at the bottom of page 57, shall post on the website. We need to take out the alternative text because I think we don't want to distribute or to parents in writing. We want to keep it on the website and then distribute it as necessary, I would imagine.
Yes, correct. We have our plan linked on our AIS section of our site now.
Okay, so we want to make sure that comes out when we approve it, that alternative text. We don't need that. Then Anne has a question. She says, in the middle of the page, on page 57, I have underlined which are attached to this policy with a question. Are they? Which is in the paragraph that starts with eligibility for academic intervention. So if they're not attached to this policy, how do you want to handle that so they're referenced appropriately?
Yeah, it's essentially that is the plan. The district adopted procedures is our RTI plan. So that's I don't know what the word attached means. It's not like we're physically going to attach it, but essentially is referencing our RTI plan when they're talking about the procedures.
Okay, so do we want to note that somewhere or just put a period after procedures and take out which are attached?
Yeah, or instead of which are attached or are noted in district's RTI plan or something like that, so that it's clear that's where they.
Yeah, so that's, I guess I'm asking you to recommend some language for that.
Where is it here again? Yeah, I would say uniformly applied district developed district adopted procedure which are noted in the district's approved RTI plan, board approved RTI plan.
But we should spell out RTI because I think that's the first time we use it in the policy.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can use the language above response to intervention in parentheses RTI.
Yep. Okay. And noted that that's also on page 58. 2/3 of the way down the first bullet again, the references are attached to this policy. So that's the set of 4 bullets at the end. It's in the first one. So we'll have to update that also.
Yep, we can use the same language for that.
Okay. And then it says every 2 years. At the end, beginning July 1st, 2002, and every 2 years thereafter, the superintendent shall review and revise the description of the academic intervention services.
So that's essentially what we'll be doing is bringing forth an RTI plan every 2 years for approval like we did last year.
Okay, so we can leave that language as is.
Yep.
We just want to confirm that frequency is appropriate.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So. All right, so we are at 6:30. Does anybody have anything else for 4325? Okay. All right.
Can I suggest we take a 5-minute break?
Okay. We can do that. So we'll just, don't hang up, guys. Just mute yourself and put your camera off, and we'll resume in 5 minutes from now. And it's 6:31 according to my clock. So does that work for everybody?
Yeah, Heath, you're all set too. Thank you, Heath, for your time.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. It was good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Heath.
Yep. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I think we can start with the superintendent's report.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen 1 second. All right, so a report that is a little bit more lengthy in terms of bullets, as you can see here. We thought we'd do the regular news and updates and then the celebrations of success. And then those 3 updates after that are very kind of timely and relevant and a lot happening. So we thought we would not have necessarily a set presentation type thing, but really just kind of give you an update. It's a lot of moving pieces at this point in these. So we kind of wanted to talk through them and just give you an idea of where we are in some situations that literally feel like they're changing by the minute in some cases. And you'll see that in the report itself too. So again, I just like to kind of point out our social media successes and our communication. It's certainly something we've been emphasizing and has been our goal. And you can see that the month coming back in now for March did a nice job. And we thank Brian Radowitz for his work there in getting those posts up and getting that information out to our community. And you can see the views. That's what's had the most views and comments and shares and most clicks, some of the things that are being shared there and liked. So we appreciate Brian's work in making that happen. I wanted to point out the Reading Apprenticeship program. And this was in a previous board update, but really thank the teachers there that are involved and as well as our administrators as they have been awarded participation in this new federal grant program with a pretty significant value there of $35,000. And really, as you see from that last paragraph, it's a program that will engage in a process to discover tools and perspective to apprentice their students in any subject area, develop the student comprehension skills and building necessary content knowledge, the peer collaboration skills, student persistence, all really important things that we're looking to do and really trying to build lifelong readers there at the middle school. So we thank those folks for taking that on and again, pushing themselves and getting out of their own comfort zones and doing those type of things for ourselves on behalf of our students. Wanted to make sure we mentioned the deadline for submitting petitions for the Board of Education is April 19th. So that date is quickly approaching. I want to make sure we have that out there for folks. And I just put one line in there. We have recently received guidance on a whole bunch of things. The new travel and quarantining information that is certainly out there now. That was multiple rounds of guidance changes. The latest being the international travelers So we have updated our survey. We had, a few calls today from folks because the questions were a little outdated. That guidance came in late on, that one was late on, no, that was during last week, right? Mixing them all up now, but we got the questions updated from Questar this morning and got those changed. So you'll see those on our screening tool starting tomorrow. Social distancing and the in-person instruction piece, we've received that guidance. That is the one that came out late on Friday. And we are working through some of those questions and what that really means for us. There's some components in there about public comment type sessions that we'd have to do if we want to make some changes. We have our weekly call with our county Department of Health on Wednesday. We'll discuss all these changes with them. We also have an administrators meeting on Wednesday too. So we're really going to dive deeper into this and see what it means for us specifically as a district in terms of where we are and what the requirements are. There are a few things that do kind of jump out at you in that guidance without getting into the details too much, but there's definitely a concern with the eating in the cafeteria versus a classroom. So if you go down from 6 feet to 3 feet in your classroom, you right now can't eat in the 3 feet. So we don't really have a place to have them eat necessarily, right? Because they're eating in their classroom. So if we have them eat in their rooms, we have to stay at 6 feet. So there's a lot of those type of complexities that we have to talk through and work through. And again, kind of hard to look at this realistically in the middle of April, right? In terms of the logistics of just even physically moving desks and chairs and tables and getting things into spaces. So I just don't want people to hear that these changes are there and, oh, we're in and we're going to be changing them. There's also an issue. Our county is in red or high. I can't remember the term that they get used interchangeably. So we're limited to what we can and can't do just based on our rate of transmission. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be flushed out. So really just a caution, I guess, for the board and the public that I think it's a nice soundbite and a nice headline. Districts can move to 3 feet distancing. It's like a lot of this stuff, there's a lot below the surface on that. So we will flush it out. We will certainly dive into it and do what we can, but I just don't want people to think that it's, inevitably going to happen here in the next couple of weeks or something. And then the end of year events, we just got that guidance that a lot of prom, graduation, those type of events. We literally just got that this afternoon. So we need to look into that as well. We have a little committee that we formed internally that is looking at all of our proposed end of year events at the high school. And we'll take the new guidance and kind of work through it. That's got Val Miller, who's one of our directors of nursing, Heath, our principal, high school principal, Mark Bubniak, our athletic director, and myself. So we're reviewing all those to try and make sure we have consistency between spectators and sporting events and, senior picnic and Mr. AP and all these events. We really want to make sure that we're being as consistent and as safe as possible. And we got some really good voices at the table there. And so far it's worked out really well. So we'll continue taking a look at the guidance and adapting ourselves appropriately there, the social distancing, and of course the travel and the quarantining. So a lot of new things have happened all in the last few days. So the ever-changing.
Sorry, a question for you. In terms of the guidance and working through that, is there representatives from the students as well?
For the end of year events?
Just with the junior, senior events in particular.
Heath has been working closely with the class officers.
Okay.
I don't know the specifics. I know he meets with his leadership groups and his student groups and has been working with the advisor for the class as well as the student officers to make sure there's a good deal of student input in those areas. So, yep.
Thanks.
And we've sent some of them back for like modification, and they've made changes based on kind of what we're comfortable with as an administration and what we think is safe and can do, and what they want to do and can do. And it's like anything else, there's a lot of compromise, and we're all trying to work through the best answer. So, but yeah, it's a good question. The video, I'll bring that up now here. So thanks again to Brian Video. A lot of really positive stuff going on throughout the district. I wanted to share that with everyone. And now our updates. So I'm going to rely on Michael a lot on these three. He's been taking the lead on this. So the PFOA update, we've talked a little bit about it, but we've engaged our architectural firm Mosaic and our agents rep Bill McMorty on this, and we've met with representatives, and we have some updates for you there. I think Michael can kind of talk you through where we're at with that.
Okay. So initially, we were problem solvers, and we had a pretty serious problem based on the testing results that require us to stop using the drinking water throughout the building, cooking, cleaning in the cafeteria, in the kitchen, and that's really quite a involved process to be using bottled water to do all those types of functions. And as I said, initially we're problem solvers, and the big problem is the water issue, and trying to potentially hook up to the town's water supply would be the most logical solution, or the most the solution that gives us the best resolution. But what we've determined after assessing the distance and the cost to get hooked up to the town water supply, and it's quite a ways away, that it's not something that we can do alone at this point, and that we wouldn't be able to, as the district, go outside our footprint of Algonquin to connect to the town's water supply, which is somewhere over on Weatherwax or further down off of Snyder's Corners Road. So we took a step back, and we think that we believe that the most immediate issue that we really need to resolve is the issue with the kitchen and the cafeteria. All that goes around the cooking and cleaning and dishwashing there. We can, temporarily utilize until there's a bigger solution that we can be a part of, certainly, but not be doing this alone. Is that, bottled water is sufficient and will work throughout the building. And the resolution that we would propose to do in the kitchen and talking with our engineering firm, and they engage their specialist in this area, is to put a filtering system that would be approved by the County Department of Health in conjunction with the State Department of Health, a filtering system that will take out the PFOA, but we would do it for the kitchen water. So we would have to so this would be a smaller version of what might be used for the full building type of situation. We're getting pricing on that, and would also require, because it requires the source water has to be cold water, so we'd have to put in a hot water heater type system after we splice off of the main line to gain, get access to the water, run it through the filter, run it through the hot water heater, and then to our kitchen supply. We're getting pricing on that, but we think, that this is a project that would fall within, in the $100,000 range or so. But we got some preliminary pricing. But what we did do is we reached out to SED to determine if this component of the project of the resolution of the issue, in the interim, before there's so like I said, some larger resolution that might include connecting to a town water supply, one that we would hope that would be fairly close, much like Post and Kill Elementary, which when we hooked up to that, although it wasn't for these circumstances, was right out in front of the building. So we hopefully will have a situation where that comes to be at some point. But this will resolve the problem in the kitchen and cafeteria area. And what we would do is SED said that they would approve this as an emergency project. So now what does that do? Well, to get to that point, the board would have to pass a resolution. We'd have a secret a resolution as well. It would be considered a type 2 project. It would also require the board's resolution that I've talked to Jeff, and he'd be drafting in conjunction with Mosaic and Cali. And what would that allow us to do is to appropriate funds from our reserves to complete the project. And much like the $100,000 capital exclusion projects, we could be aided on that immediately and not have to wait, to have it amortized over a 15-year period. So that's really helpful. We think that longer term, what we've learned from the county is that there's likely to be some more study, a broader study around the area to determine if there's a wider spread, I'll call it contamination, or higher than allowed thresholds of the PFOA, and that might be the impetus for some larger conversation in the area about extending the town water supply or something of that nature. But at this point, that's what we're recommending we proceed with, and we've had some conversations with Cali, Bill McMorty, Jeff Honeywell, and we have approval from SED to move forward as an emergency project. Any questions?
Thanks for the update and problem solving a resolution that seems really reasonable given everything, all the circumstances and the distance from the municipal water lines.
Certainly, it's an interim step because and we're going to resolve the most immediate concern. But long term, there has to be a different resolution to where we can utilize the in-house water supply for drinking fountains and things of that nature.
There seems to be an issue in other schools as well, as far as drinking water and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if we couldn't do a district-wide approach down the road for getting federal funds. I mean, you could call this an infrastructure problem, maybe, or it's certainly health related.
It is, but I think that the issue here is that we as a school district, we cut across 9 different towns. We're realizing that we can't be the lead agency on municipal water supplies, right? We don't control the municipal governments, and if that's a concern, that has to be organized by the municipal governmental agencies. I would think working in conjunction with the county is how that would work.
So some advocacy would be helpful.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about staying in our lane. Like, I think in this pandemic, we've had to go out of our lane quite a bit, understandably so, and take on some things. But as we went through the options, we really are getting into, multiple towns and jurisdictions. And it just seemed like we needed to, I think Michael put it best, we need to address the kitchen in the building first, because it's just not practical what we're doing right now long term. This is the definition of an emergency stopgap where it's just not something we can sustain. So let's fix that first and then kind of continue to play through these options. But that when you look at them, it's best if we kind of take care of our property, our system, and certainly if there's movement in the areas around us to do things, we're certainly on board with it and supporting it and advocating, or doing all that type of stuff. But I don't know if we want to take the lead on, bringing municipal water in and people's property, and it gets very complicated very quickly, I think.
Point taken.
Michael, you mentioned that we would receive state aid almost immediately following the project. What percentage do we anticipate that state aid being?
Same as our building aid ratio, 78%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the capital project. So we talked about a second week in October vote, which will require us to get back together to organize what we want the proposition to include. We talked about the likely that we would want to have this resolved or early summer at the latest, in July, because we're going to need to, in order to get the 45 days in, we'll need to have a resolution passed by the end of July or August, I think it was. Bill McWhorty is going to provide us a timeline. So we're going to back into the timeline from an October vote. But we do need to move forward with the, with the project planning process. Is there anything did you want to add on that, Jim?
Yeah, and I think the timeline, and I think the method for moving forward in terms of the work that we do. We've talked about the two options really, I think, is the board subcommittee that we used in the past, or more of a full board, sort of like the policy review session model. And I think we've tossed that around, and I think we're of the mindset that it might be better to do this as a full board. That if you look at those priority items, if we kind of clump them by the priority and we review them. So I don't know if literally going line by line is necessarily what we're saying, but close to it. At least take a look at that grouping and kind of decide as a full group where people are, just to kind of, instead of doing the development stage as a separate subcommittee and then bringing it back, that in this case, it probably makes more sense, get it done and, make sure we got clear direction and can move forward and all that type of stuff. So I think that's our recommendation.
Time. So I think for the full board to review and be part of that process, because of the pandemic and, the vote, the previous vote, I think it's good to have everyone involved.
I agree with that. Is there any plans for public hearings on that? On the project before we present what is to be included?
Yeah, I think what we're thinking, Doug, it's a good question, is do we want to do some of that prioritizing and reviewing as a full group first, kind of decide where we are, and then kind of reach out a little bit? That in our mind, it made more sense maybe to start with this group here, kind of get an idea of where everyone is, and then go out and communicate that to people. Leaning towards.
Yeah, I don't know about with the.
I'm using that money, the rules from the federal government, and then whatever rules New York places upon it, and there might be even more restrictions. So we're going to work through that information over the next week or so. We haven't even had a chance yet to talk administratively to building principals and department heads. And we just briefly met as a central office this morning. But what I kind of want to talk to you, just as a little setup to the conversations that we're going to have, is that I always explain to you, you can't always just take, and everybody does like to do that, and the public is very aware of the numbers that the state, when the legislative budget is adopted, our numbers won't always, what we put into the budget won't always exactly reflect what is presented as the available funds, because in our assessment, they aren't always exactly what we have knowledge of that is happening in the current year, because a lot of these aid categories are expense based. So what we spend this year will be, the aid will flow next year. So we have more intimate knowledge of what the expenditure trends are in the current year versus what the state might have in projecting our aid. So this just gives you, I just wanted to set that and up for you, and because I don't want to have to, again, we're going to talk more at some future meetings about this, or at least another meeting, before we present the budget, for adoption by the board, is that this is actually what the legislative budget looked like last year when it was presented to us when the budget was passed. So they were projecting our BOCES aid would be 1.633 million. Well, the actual aid that we ended up getting this year, when these expenditures were calculated for what happened last year, is only 1.567. So it was almost $66,000 less. And so I just, like, these are examples of for why you just kind of need to trust when we make some adjustments to the numbers of why we're doing it. There's rationale behind it. The high cost aid, the state projected that we would have, that's for our special education services, 598,000, but really what we have is only 582,000. And we knew that those were the projections were too high. They projected that we would only get $127,000 of the private excess cost aid, and that turned out to be 189,000 that we're actually getting. And the transportation was big because they projected 3.3 million, and we're actually only getting 3.2 million. But I'll show you in a little bit that that's even though it's a lesser amount than the state projected, it's more than we actually budgeted for, and there's a reason for that. So the state's budget to actual had a negative variance, but ours, we have a positive variance. So I just want you to know, why I go through those, and I do it year after year, is you need to know that that when you see the state budget, what's been adopted by the state doesn't mean that that's what we're gonna plug into our actual revenue budget for next year, because there's always variances and information that the state just doesn't have that we do. All right, so in the blue is the 21-22 state aid per the legislative budget that was adopted. We're going to get 16.8 million of foundation aid, and that's actually a $377,000 increase over the current year. This yellow kind of beigeish column, that's actually what we're going to include in our budget for 21-22. But we'll talk more about that. But what I really want to just get through is this is the legislative budget for this year that they're projecting. Building aid, we're always pretty close with that, and we're going to be, because it's based on actual expenditures that we've already had. Transportation aid, their budget, they're projecting 3.4 million. We really think that it's going to be less than that. We're only going to budget 3.2 million because I see the trends. I can see what we're actually spending now. They base that 3.4 million on us spending everything that's in our transportation codes this year. They get that information, our budget, in the summertime, our current year budget. So they're basing that on a number that we'll never get to. So we have to adjust that slightly. These are what we call the instructional material aids: textbook, software, library, and computer hardware. Those are all based on student counts. So that's what they're projecting, and we'll use that for the budget. The BOCES aid is, again, an expenditure-based aid based on the current year expenditures. And I think that's a reasonable assumption. That's why we're going to use in the beige column the same number. I actually think that based on what we know our placements are, that the budget, the state budget, is too low for our public high cost. So we're going to go with a number that's higher than that. The private cost is too high. We're going to go with a number lower than that. But bottom line for the state aid that's been projected for us is this $25.8 million. Pretty close to what we would put in the budget. It's only about $200,000 less is what we would include in the budget. So we're pretty close. The big numbers that have been included in the budget, that when folks are talking about, wow, there's this huge amount of additional aid, are these two different aid categories here. This is the Corona Recovery and Relief Act funds, and we're going to be getting $2.5 million. Now, that money, at this point, it's allocated for us to use, and there's, it's very discretionary. We have the ability to use these funds at our discretion. So there's not a lot of strings attached to this or requirements for us to use it for specifics, other than to be able to maintain our academic programs. One of the things that they said, you can't just use the $2.5 million to reduce taxes or to add to your reserves directly. I guess I'll get rid of that prior to gap elimination adjustment, Chris. That's another carryover from the old days. So those funds are available, but at this point, they're only available for 2 years. So it's quite a bit of money to try to figure out how to use it in a 2-year window without creating a cliff for us after the 2 years. Now, there was some talk that maybe that might extend out for another year, and that would be helpful. But we're going to be working on a plan to figure out how to utilize that money without those available funds, without creating a cliff for ourselves. And that's the conversations that we're going to have this week. We did some preliminary discussions this morning about how do we utilize these funds to maintain or to help in academic recoveries circumstances, and also to maintain a stable financial footing for the district going forward after these funds have expired, whether it's 2 or 3 years out. And then we have another additional American Rescue Plan allocation of $2 million. That has quite a bit more restrictions on how it's used. It's quite a bit of these funds have to be used, and rightfully so, again, for academic recovery, learning loss recovery plans, and interventions and things like that. That has a 3-year availability to it, those funds. So we'll have those allocated for the next, just that, it's that pot to be used over 3 years, not a recurring allocation of $2 million. So our total that we would be getting is $30,409,000. There's also an allocation in our budget of that I don't account for in here of about $351,000 for universal pre-K, and that we haven't discussed or endeavored to go down the road of a UPK program. I mean, that's been talked about in the past about what opportunities we have. I know that was part of what Kara had presented to the board about our pre-K environment in the Able Park School District, access, parental access to those, those programs, and that there seems to be a strong availability for those. And that also is the kind of thing that you have to be careful with, in that once you get that initial startup money from the state, but then it goes away, and then it has to be absorbed into the general fund budget. That's challenging. So we haven't addressed that here, but those are additional funds that were allocated to us and to other districts. Questions at this point? Because I just have a little bit more I want to talk about.
I just wanted to ask Mike if either the CRR, the Corona Relief, or the American Rescue Plan would address any of the student support services like mental health services that we had talked about in the past. And I know that having a 2 or 3 year plan and then coming to the cliff would be a problem for us. But I was just wondering, in the short term, would they supply any funds for those services?
I'm going to say just briefly, and then Matt, if you want to just share your thoughts on this, it's helpful. Again, so we're really kind of trying to put together. We had some initial brainstorming, and Matt did some more this afternoon about how we, craft a plan, create a framework for those kinds of supports, or something that we definitely talked about. And again, it's that conversation. We're on such a compressed timeline now because we really have to adopt a budget really by late next week. But we have, I believe, some really good ideas about how to utilize the resources that we have, where we could add staff, but where we have ideas for sort of bringing them back into the general fund as other potential retirements and things like that happen, so that if we stage this correctly, we don't have a situation where we either have a big cliff where we have all these folks and we can't afford them, and then we have to lay them off, or we really need them still, and we have to try to find some large tax increase, which we don't want to do. And that's another piece that I'll let Matt share a little bit of his thoughts, and then I want to talk to you about the tax levy conversation that we've had too. So Matt, did you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just, it's something that we discussed this morning, Doug, and I think we want to have that conversation with the rest of the admin team. We recognize that after, what will end up being about 1.5 years of disrupted education, there's going to be SEL needs. There's about 600 kids that haven't been in our schools full time in over 1.5 years. So we know that bringing them back into the mix next fall, hopefully there's going to be needs there. So it's something that kind of came to my mind after I saw the money as a potential need. And as Michael said, we're trying not to set ourselves up for situations where we, in 2 or 3 years down the road, we have to figure out how we're going to continue to fund something. But there are certain areas that I think we may have to address simply because the need is going to be there. And maybe it's not a recognized need in September, but shortly thereafter, we may find ourselves with a high population of students that need some support, and we would have to react that way as well. So I think it's a conversation we absolutely want to have with our administrative team and get the sense of if they have something already in place in the building that could support it, or if there would be needs there.
I agree. It needs more conversation. Just an observation. I don't know if this is correct, Mike, but is that it comes to 4.5 million in between those two plans for the virus and the rescue plan. Is that included in the budget as a 1 year item, or is that somehow spread out over the 2 or 3 years? I think it would be misleading to the public if that $4.5 million is something that the state says they're giving us in 21-22. How is that shown on our spreadsheets and in our budget?
On the state aid runs, it's shown just like that. It's shown as those two items. It doesn't show it in that with the total of 30, but it does show those two line items. Yeah, as ours. And one of the things that one of the requirements of both of these federal funds is that we will have to present a plan that has to be made public. So I think that's important then that we share out to communicate just what you're saying. Hey, community, this is good that we have these resources, and here's how we're going to use them, but be aware, these are not a recurring $2 million. If that was it'd be fabulous. And it's good that we have these. It's a good challenge for us, and it's going to certainly help us to do some important work, but we have to proceed very cautiously to make sure like that, like I said, we don't create a bigger problem down the line in future years.
Because in actuality, the increase in total aid is only 4.23%. So if we were to include those gigantic numbers of 4.5 million in a budget,
Oh, yeah.
it would misrepresent what we're actually getting. Is that correct?
That's true. I mean, I guess you could look at that and just say, let's break that $4 million up over three. Let's assume that they give us an extra year on the Corona relief monies. You know, that's still a pretty good chunk over 3 years. But again, that's the problem. It's a big chunk over 3 years, and then it's gone. And that's really, you know, that's important that we manage that correctly.
Is there any indication of what might be included in those plans, such as hardware, internet services, that sort of thing?
I don't know about, well, I honestly, I haven't seen like more detail, but I think certainly hardware will be allowed, and I don't know why, you know,
Good.
we are providing some internet connectivity to
Right.
to families that don't have access or you know, otherwise wouldn't have access. We're providing some access to them, and so I would be shocked if they weren't, because of allowable cost, because that's the whole goal of is to make sure that students have learning opportunities, the correct learning opportunities, and part of that is getting getting students back into school, and so costs related around that too will certainly be available through these federal funds.
Thank you.
I think, and then we had one webinar or meeting we participated in today with state aid planning from Questar. There's actually one by NISBA and one by NISCUS, both the next couple of days. So there's a lot of information is kind of very much in flux. The one thing, and it's written as a paragraph, I showed it to you, so it's not really very clear, but some of the things in there do mention educational technology, everything, you know, students experiencing homelessness, stuff about the social emotional question you asked earlier, after school programs. I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive list, but I think what we're going to need a little bit more of is clarification about what some of that stuff means and what qualifies and doesn't. So I think we're getting that information, and hopefully it'll become more clear over time, and hopefully very quickly. Because as we said, we got hopefully these webinars and the information we're getting the next couple of days will be very, very helpful, because as Michael mentioned, we have a timeline that has us adopting a budget, and, you know, within a week and a half or so. So we're on the clock for sure.
Yes,
So.
I see.
All right. So the last thing I just wanted to touch on was, so I told you, yes, that, you know, we're going to make assumptions in our revenue plan on the state side, on the state aid component of it, that differ from what they're projecting. But what we do know is, yes, this is the amount, the foundation aid increase gives us the $337,000 more of additional foundation aid. I might have said 377, it's 337. We know, as I said before, we're going to have additional students with disabilities aid than the state's projecting. And what happened, why we have this big jump in transportation aid, is because what we budgeted for last year, and again, I told you, we're getting quite a bit more than we had anticipated in the current budget, more than this $303,055,000. We're getting that 3.2 that we're going to project out for next year, is because last year we were led to believe at the end of the year that the state was not going to aid transportation, you know, costs that we incurred from the shutdown till the end of the year. That was a big firestorm. There was a lot of conversation around that because you had districts continuing to pay transportation staff. We were doing that because some, you know, there were points where they were providing services, whether it was delivering meals and different things like that. But it was also that we needed them to be on call right away, because you recall there really wasn't a full shutdown, I think, until mid-May. So I think we probably went almost 2 months where we, wasn't laying people off. And other districts who had contract transportation were continuing to pay their contractors because they needed them to be available and ready to work. So we were under the impression, so we reduced what we anticipated our aid would be, and that turned out, I think there was enough pressure put on politically that the state reversed course and did not take those transportation deductions. So we'll be seeing an increase up to what I think, is a more reasonable number of like a normal year, which would be that 3.2 million. So it does represent an increase that helps us in our budgeting. And so that's really all I just wanted to talk about the state aid part of it. You'll see in this revenue looks very similar. And if you look at the top line, the tax levy, that's the 1.9. That's our 2% limit. It's the levy limit for this year, which is actually under 2%. We've done a lot of conversations since we last met with the board, our central office, talking about various plans for what if we did no tax levy increase, partial. And then we have this suddenly we had a plan A, and then I had a plan B, and I had a presentation for you tonight, and then we started digging into the details of this additional $4.5 million, and that changed course to plan, I think C, D, and E, or maybe somewhere down that line. But again, so we're really working on that as a component of the overall plan. Like, what should we do with tax levy now? How does this tie into our capital project that's coming up? And we'll have more information, but I'm confident that we'll be sharing a recommendation that doesn't take us to the full levy limit, but also doesn't go to a full zero either, because there's impacts both ways on that can create foundational problems for future budgets. But we'll talk to you more about in the context of the larger plan, what we think would be appropriate and reasonable given all the circumstances of the community as well, and what we know in terms of the revenue and the additional federal money and what we're allowed to do with those funds. So, any questions?
What's 1% tax levy worth in terms of dollars?
About half of that, about $308,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have on this, and we're gonna be spending a lot of time working on budgetary planning over the next few days. And did you want to talk about? Are you going to start talking about timeline about what we, getting information to them, adopting the budget, that kind of?
Yeah, that's sort of the last thing on the list here for tonight. So, as Michael kind of referenced, there was a plan A, a plan B, a C, a D, and an E, and it keeps changing as we learn more about this and we get more information. So, right now, obviously today is the 12th. We have a meeting scheduled for the 20th. That meeting is required because of the Questar vote. So that's locked in. Our plan, at one point, I think we talked about adopting tonight, way back. We kind of quickly realized we'd have to postpone the adoption to the 20th. Our thought now is, as Matt referenced earlier, we have an admin meeting coming up. We have these webinars. We're gaining information. We want to come back to you with a pretty good plan that's thought out. The question is, do you want to have a meeting prior to the vote? So another meeting, like a special budget type meeting, and then do the vote? Or do you want to get all this information all in one meeting at one time and have to vote on it? Our assumption is that you probably would want a meeting and then a vote. So we're locked in on Tuesday. We could do like a Monday and Tuesday, or we could do like a Tuesday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday. I originally had a Kiwanis presentation Monday night. I wrote them back and they wrote me. I wrote them back and said, you must have been reading my mind, because I was hoping somehow to get out of it for 1 week. And they wrote me and said, anyway, we can switch you to 426. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yes, that'd be perfect, actually, because we like the board to be the first audience. So we would be providing them information that either wasn't accurate or before you got it, or it would just be a mess. So that's solved that problem for us. So I guess the short question is 2 meetings or 1 meeting? And then part B, if you want 2 meetings, what does your schedule look like next week?
So Jim, we have the meeting on the 20th, right?
Meeting on the 20th, that's locked and loaded. You can't do anything about that one because that's the Questar vote.
Right.
So you can do one before and still adopt on Tuesday. So we can do Monday and Tuesday. Or if you want to make Tuesday more of the where we kind of share some of this and lay it out for you more. And then if you want a day or 2 to process it, come back and have a special meeting on Wednesday and Thursday, or Wednesday or Thursday, not and Wednesday or Thursday. And we could do we could do something in that regard. Or do you want it in one shot, which we're totally fine with too. We don't want to overwhelm. We don't want to rush you. We also don't want to create another meeting and have 3 and 8 work days. So we leave it up to the will of the board here.
Remind me, guys, and fellow board members, the Questar vote with that, I mean, that's going through what their suggestion. So it's not an in-depth dive. It's rather just reviewing what they're proposing. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's the Questar election, right? Is on that one, I think, right?
Yeah.
And if I remember,
The administrative budget.
the administrative budget.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, this is off the top of my head, so don't hold me to this. I believe there are 3 candidates for 3 positions.
Right.
So
That tends to be more of a format. I mean, my vote is to just do Tuesday night because we've already got time allocated towards it. I mean, if we have to do the Questar stuff, which it sounds like if it's 3 seats for 3 people, that's more just, going through the motions, and then whatever their administrative budget is, looking at that, but then making time to go through whatever new information you guys may have for us. I mean,
the advantage to that, Chris, would be, and I'm not trying to push one way or another, is that the agenda, in theory, for the 20th should be rather light since we're meeting today. So in theory, no promises. We won't put on 3 presentations or anything like that. I'll resist the temptation to. So it should be in
We're
theory.
holding you to that.
That's right. There'll be no
Yeah,
policy
absolutely we are.
review. There'll be no. So in theory, we would have a shorter agenda and could really devote most of it to the board or to the budget. But again, we want to be respectful of, because we know even what we're telling you today, we talked a lot about this, like we feel like we're not giving you a ton of information. It's because we honestly don't have it, and we're not from a lack of trying, but it's just changed so much and we're learning so much about it. We want to be accurate and thorough with what we present to you, and make sure you have some time to digest it. So.
Doug, what do you think?
I think one night, the 20th, as long as there's no BOCES presentations.
Definitely no BOCES. That's a good clarifying question. There are no presentations by BOCES that night.
Okay.
Thanks. Peter, how about you?
I agree. And no policy review.
That's already on the schedule, no policy review. Okay, so we could do one night too, and we'll hold you to your no big presentations.
Okay.
So we really have time to ask a lot of questions about the budget and, devote our resources to that. And that gives.
If you needed more time, you could always add a meeting at the
That's
conclusion
true.
of Tuesday too. If
That's
for whatever
true.
reason, if we're not fully clear or things are still developing or whatever it is, if you want to say, listen, we want to digest this, can we come back on Wednesday or Thursday or something? We really don't want to push it beyond Thursday, because then we get into a timeline that we set up with Brian Radowitz and communications for the budget newsletter and all those things that we have to hit. So on the back end, we kind of have a hard deadline. It actually was it's already been tweaked a little bit, so we've condensed that. So we really would rather not go beyond, ideally it was Wednesday, we could push it to Thursday, but then we're beyond that, we're really tightening up, not our work as much as we're impacting some others in the turnaround time for them to write and review and the publishing type folks, so.
Okay. Well, I think everybody, seems to agree we may be able to tackle that in one meeting, so that's good. I mean, we've already had plenty of good information shared, which is helpful. That's why we have a nice calendar Michael sets up for us every year.
Yeah, and I suspect with the 3 folks who aren't able to make it, since they already have that Tuesday night blocked off, hopefully it'd be easier for them too.
Right. Agreed. Okay. All right.
That concludes the superintendent's report. The good news is that's the vast majority of the meeting, so.
Thank you.
Jim, I have one thought on your celebrations for success. That was nice presentation tonight. That was a nice video. And some of the student artwork every year simply stuns me. It's spectacular. And one of those pictures really impressed me as we were going through that celebrations video. Is there any way you could post some of those on the website or let us know when they will be on display and where?
Yeah.
You don't have to say it now. I'm just saying if you could put it on the website when they were, because those are the artwork that coming out of our visual arts department is truly outstanding.
Yeah, let me work. We'll get the video out. We usually get that the next day, but maybe some focus on some of those artwork pieces would be nice. We just did, we had some more students recognized and we got that information out. And I agree with you. And I am constantly amazed at the quality of work our art department.
Yes.
And it really is, it's stunning. I don't know how else, but it's every year. It's every year that it's just, and I have, my experience at Algonquin, I remember just being blown away by what was being done at the middle school with art. And then to see it follow through as I got to be the district longer and the work being done at the high school, and of course, the foundation at the elementary school, just as a K-12 program, it's really out of this world. So I agree. Yeah, let me talk to, we'll work with Brian and our art folks on trying to get some information or some display out there of some kind virtually.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Good suggestion. Okay. On to item number 4, public comment. Community members seeking to provide questions or comments to the Board of Education should email them to the district clerk, and they will be shared. Do I have a motion? Chris, thank you. Doug, second.
Yeah.
Discussion.
I usually try not to single out some folks, but seeing as I've gotten to know Barb Gettig over the years, just want to wish her well in her retirement. A wonderful lady, and certainly will be missed. I hope she chooses to come back in some form or fashion later on if she's so inclined.
Agree. Thank you, Chris. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call it to a vote, but I can't see you guys all. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Peter, was that an aye? Sorry, I can't see everybody.
Yes, it was an aye.
Okay.
An eye for an eye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. On to item number 6, the policy review, to review the policy 4531, field trips and excursions. So we were presented with the policy. It's fairly similar to our original policy. It has one or two sentences that say we are no longer going to approve overseas field trips. Does anybody have any comments or questions or suggestions on the first reading? I was fine with the language. Peter, do you have something?
Yeah, when I was looking at what was posted, it didn't seem to be a complete document. And maybe it's my computer, but if we're talking about 40,
It was very
4531 and 4531, it's kind of broken up. I don't know if anybody else experienced that.
The date is on the next page.
Yeah. 4531, the policy itself is like half a page. It's very short and sweet. The regulation is much longer, but we no longer have to approve the regulations.
Can you see what is in blue there, Peter?
Yes.
Okay.
The underlined part,
Yes. Okay.
is that a link to something or just highlighted?
I don't think it's a link. I think it's just the wording.
I think that's the additional
Yeah,
part.
that's the modification to the document.
So I guess the question I have, should we be more specific about Canada? Because it's pretty much travel across the country. Should we limit it to Montreal?
Or Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto and Montreal. I'm sorry, Ontario.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ontario and Quebec, maybe.
Yeah. Where have we historically gone? I think it's just those two places, really, right?
I think Montreal and Quebec.
City. Yeah, I mean, I think at least the French program is the only one I'm aware of who's consistently gone up there. But certainly Ontario, I would imagine, would still be one that folks could do as well if they had some good reason for it.
If I'm understanding the question and the concern, so the board will not approve any field trips to foreign countries except Canada. Are you saying to limit it to where you can in the policy?
Well, Canada's, well, I guess if we're saying out anywhere in the United States, then we probably should say Canada.
I was just going to say, because you could still not approve a trip to a part of Canada that you're not comfortable with.
That's true. True.
It
Okay.
just enables you to, I guess the way it's worded now, the benefit of the way it's worded now is that it enables you to approve any trip to Canada, but you always have the ability to not approve a trip to somewhere in Canada, including Montreal or Quebec because of some kind of world event or something going on or what have you.
Mm-hmm. So is the suggestion that we include that part?
Which part?
The underlined part.
Oh. Can you go to the policy, Jim?
Yeah, I think,
Please.
Peter, what you're saying, that last portion, which is the underlined area, is specific. That's what's been modified or has been added to the document.
Can you see my screen now or no?
Yes, we can see your screen. You're on the regulation.
Yeah.
Oh. That's what happens when I can't see my own screen.
Yeah, I think you may be, that's all the regulation one. Top one. There you go. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Right there, right?
So it's interesting. This one is not underlined, but I think, Peter, what you're referring to is that last paragraph, the Board of Education through educational requirements is underlined in some
Correct.
versions.
Yeah, the version in the board portal was the marked up line version, so you can see the changes. The version in the public portal is the clean one.
Ah,
So the
okay.
version that I brought up here is off the website. That's the clean one. We just put the marked up one in for the board in your portal, just so you knew, make it easier for you to find the changes and the differences.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it sounds like we're generally okay with this, but I'm also inclined because, you know, we just have a quorum tonight to view this as a first reading and bring it back for a second reading.
I agree with you, Jess.
Yes, I agree too.
Oh, sure. There you go. Adding something else to the 20th.
No one said we had to approve it on the 20th, Chris. We can do that in May.
I agree.
Okay. But in general, Doug, Chris, and Peter, you're okay with it, or you still want to think about it?
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Me
this
too.
works.
Okay. But okay. All right. So I just want to make sure that we have to, you know, make no edits to this version as we go towards the second reading. So. All right. Any additional thoughts? Okay. Moving on to item number 7, a resolution for BOCES, the contract for cooperative education services. Do I have a motion?
So
Chris?
moved.
Chris?
Doug?
And all right, so Chris was first and Doug second. Discussion on this. This is to purchase our Chromebooks for the next year so we can make sure we get them in time.
416 of them, right?
Yep. That would be for the incoming 6th grade class, correct, Matt?
It is for actually the incoming 5th and incoming 9th, be 2 classes.
Okay, sorry. Yep. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That passed unanimously. Okay, on to item number 8, board reports. Doug, would you like to go first?
Oh,
Can you take the screen sharing off, please? Thank you.
Do you want me to skip you, Doug? I can go to
Yeah,
Chris and
I
then
just-
come back to you.
I just wanted to reinforce the suggestion that Jim had on the capital project, and that is the full board, not a subcommittee, should be involved in some of those, the process before we present it to the public, or as we're presenting it to the public. I think the full board should be involved, and hopefully we'll have input from the community prior to making a final decision.
All right. Thank you. Chris?
I'm going to save all my long-winded things for next Tuesday, the 20th. So I'll respectfully defer for this evening.
Okay, we'll hold you to that one, Chris. Peter?
I'll second that, Chris.
All right.
I don't really have anything to say. That's a lot of good work ahead of us. It's good to hear
Yes.
about the federal monies that are going to be trickling down our way. It's a good report, Michael, and look forward to working with you on it.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely.
And I don't have anything additionally either. So I guess that brings us to item number 9, to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion? Doug is waving his hand. Seconded by Peter. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.